First, I thank everybody for coming. Really appreciate this. So let's start off, kind of great intro. Spencer Jones, I'm a registered nurse and founder of Jones Innovative Medical Solutions. About a year ago, I was taking care of a patient and she was diabetic and had heart failure. So this meant I was having to prick her fingers 4 to 6 times a day and actually stick her arm with a needle 1 to 2 times a day for blood draws, even though she already had a patent IV in her other arm. And it was out of this just constant infliction of pain upon my patients that I thought there's got to be a better way. You know, it's the 21st century. We've got to come up with a device that's better for the patients and better for the hospital. And out of that, I created the bifurcated venous access device, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the problem, so patient pain is a huge problem in hospitals. It's really one of the reasons why people hate going to the hospital. They hate needles. But why are we getting pricked constantly? Well, it's because of the limited and inefficient IV access devices. I had no choice but to prick her, fingers and stick her arm because that's just the devices I had at my disposal. And lastly, part of the problem is the shrinking profit margins. Whether it's ACA regulations or an aging, baby boomer population, there's a lot of reasons why hospitals are really feeling a crunch. And just to kind of talk about these two pictures, this top picture is a PICC line. It's your most expensive, most invasive, but highly functional IV access device. And this down here is your much cheaper, kind of single function, really not the best option for patients, but it's the most common because it is the cheapest. The solution. The BVAD offers painless blood draws. That's really one of the biggest draws. 95% reduction in painful pricks and sticks when you look at a diabetic patient over a 5-day period, which is the average length of stay. It really kind of fills a wide IV access device gap. And I kind of use the analogy with the 2 devices that I just showed you. It's like if you went to U-Haul and said, hey, I need to move across town. Can I rent some equipment? And they said, absolutely. We've got a wheelbarrow or an 18-wheeler. You say, my God, I could do it with a wheelbarrow, but it's going to take me 20 of them, and the 18-wheeler is way too much. And that's kind of the option that patients have now in the hospital. And lastly, it reduces the disposable expenditures. Our research has shown that the BVAD is going to reduce each blood draw by 25% by removing human capital as well as disposable expenditures. And you might think, well, blood draws, how much does that happen? It's actually, lab testing is the single highest volume activity in all of healthcare. There's more than 6 billion lab tests done each year in the US. And how do they get those lab tests? Through blood draws. Now to the device. The bifurcated venous access device sounds fancy. It's really not. The bifurcation just means that the tubing that lies in your vein is split into 2 channels. This top channel you can see for blood draws out, and the bottom channel for fluid administration in. And I actually have the prototype over here, so I took the needle out, but you guys can pass it around and just take a look at it. Pretty simple concept, but it really makes a huge difference for the patients and healthcare workers alike. And it kind of just came out of necessity, me being a nurse and having my hands on this stuff, I kind of thought there's got to be a better way. Competitor analysis. So these are just a few of the key metrics. It's kind of hard to read, so I'll walk through it. The key metrics of what each one offers. And these 2 are represented in those earlier pictures. And then, can it do blood draws? No, yes, and yes. Can it do pain-free blood sugar tests? Neither of these 2 can, and the BVAD can. Cost per device, you see how expensive the PICC line is at $400 and how cheap the peripheral IV is at $350. And the BVAD kind of falls right in there at a great price point. Lastly, the dwell time. How long is this thing patent for? How long is it good for in your arm? The peripheral IV falls below the average length of stay, which I've never understood because it just doesn't make sense to create a device that is going to be inefficient for the majority of patients. And then the PICC line is good for 90 days, really shoots the moon. The BVAD, talking to manufacturers, engineers, and PICC team nurses, is going to fall right between 15 to 30 days, 29 days. And these 2 over here really just look at 2 things, pain and money. This is over a 5-day period. If a diabetic patient's in the hospital, they're going to have their painful instances reduced from 22 and 21 with the current devices to just 1 painful instance with the BVAD. No more finger pricks, no more needle sticks, just 1 time for the insertion. And lastly, down here, the cost for a diabetic patient with blood draws over a 5-day period, you're looking at about $60 to $70 with the peripheral IV. about $410 with the PICC line, and with the BVAD, you're looking at about $35 to $42. So you can really see it's a financially beneficial option for the hospital. Looking at the market, the U.S. IV access and device market reached about $4 billion in 2012, but more specifically, talking kind of about the problems and the barriers reaching that market. Product development with any type of medical device, there's so many capital requirements just to get from A to B to C, and even just to the proof of concept. And then once you get that, you have to get through their FDA regulatory process, which is a huge hurdle. It takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time. And then even if you get through that, you've got a great product, how are you going to get it into hospitals? 80% of all supplies used in hospitals are purchased through these group purchasing organizations. But through an investment partnership, and I'm going to give kudos to Gray Williams of Dexterra over here. He helped me and my investment partner. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. He helped me and my investment partner really reach some good common ground and come to a point where we could make a really successful partnership. Our strengths. David DePoyster, he's the owner and CEO of MedSource. MedSource invests in and develops early stage medical companies, much like mine. And this was really kind of one of the key parts of taking this thing and on the journey that it's been through. David partly owns Future Matrix Interventional out of Athens, Texas. They kind of represent a one-stop shop for your medical device engineering. They go, like it says, engineering all the way through assembly and packaging. And then lastly, what I talked about earlier, getting in those group purchasing orders. He's got a great working relationship with Medline and has taken many products through there through a licensing distribution style agreement. And so his partnership with Medline, and ultimately our partnership with Medline, is going to take this thing into the market in an aggressive way and not just barely penetrate in a few places. Another strength I'm really proud of, being a single founder, that was a huge issue I had because, I'm a nurse. I didn't know how to do many of these essential functions of a business. So I really had to lean on these guys to help me out with a lot of the decisions, and some of them helping more than others. But just really proud of this group that we put together. And traction, just to kind of show you, this thing moved extremely fast, and I kind of had to pinch myself a few times. In January, that's when I thought of it and filed the provisional patent. Innovate Arkansas client a few months after that, selected for the ARC Challenge in July, reached the investment agreement early October, and now as you're holding, it's the bench testable prototype. We're looking to get FDA approval around May 2015, and then market entry shortly after that. Cost of goods is going to be right at $3, and then the retail price is going to be $15. So we think that's a pretty good price point. Gives us a good margin and a really competitive kind of niche in the price market. Let's see. Yeah, and this is, I'm going to try to play this video, and then this will kind of wrap it up. Just kind of shows you, this was, I don't know if I'll be able to. There we go. And this is a video that was sent to me by the engineers. They were testing in the lab, and basically what they did is they hooked up a fake vein, that clear line. The clear fluid is supposed to represent the blood flowing through your vein, and they actually inserted the device. As you see there, obviously there's a needle that goes in, but we took that out. So they inserted it into the vein, and then he turns this stopcock that pushes blue fluid into the vein to kind of represent any IV fluid, whether it's a drug, antibiotic, or what have you, moving through the vein. And then secondly, you're going to see him attach just a needleless syringe, very cheap syringe, onto this second port. And it's kind of cool. When he draws it back, it's absolutely uncontaminated blood draws. So what that means is you wouldn't even have to stop a patient's IV infusion, and you can still get absolutely clean, uncontaminated blood draws for any type of test, lab test, blood sugar test, what have you. And this really capitalizes on, many of you may have heard of Theranos, a woman out of Stanford, dropped out of college, billionaire now. She created a new lab testing model that uses just tiny amounts of blood. And this really kind of capitalizes on that trend. We're using less and less blood and doing tests quicker and quicker. So I think, honestly, I would love eventually to partner with her in some form or fashion, because I think it'd be a mutually beneficial partnership. But that's pretty much it. Thank you for hearing my little pitch, and I'd love to take some questions.
And like we did with John, just step back there. So who has the first question?
First of all, I'd just like to say thanks for this idea. This is just like, my husband's a cancer patient and just recently had surgery, and I wish I could show you a photo of what his arm looked like when they got done with him. It was completely bruised. At one point they ripped the tape off and actually ripped skin off, so we're excited about all this. My question is, even though he had a port, they refused to use it for anesthesia during surgery. Can your product be used for anesthesia?
Yeah, it likely could. There are certain drugs that have to be put in what we call central lines because of their caustic nature, their pH, and different things like that. But the vast majority of things, and when you're talking about anesthesia, you're really talking about a few things. You're talking about a sedative and a paralytic and things like that. And obviously that's going to be part of the FDA approval. They're going to be running things through and see what can and can't be pushed through it. But currently right now we think that there's really not anything that's going to be contraindicated to be pushed through it at this time.
Awesome.
Question? Anyone?
I think in an industry that needs a lot of this thought process on being technically innovative, I think it's fantastic that you did step out of that university setting and you did what you thought you could do. I would like to see at some point maybe in the future where you take that into a mentoring role into these universities in some way to get these people who are in your industry to really do those things that, hey, I know this can be done better, but I'm going to step out on the line and do it instead of just keeping it in your head. I think it's fantastic what you did.
Thank you. Talking about like in the industry, one of the hurdles is getting into the hospitals because there's so many companies that monopolize this game because it is so hard to get into. And one of the things, I feel like they've kept it the way it is because they're not thinking about the patients at all. They're administrative executives and engineers, and that's pretty much the end of the process. And I think like you said, being innovative in this space, I think patient satisfaction is about to drive all medical devices because patients now have the options to see where they get health care, choose their provider, choose what type of care they get. So they're if you can say, hey, we're going to cause you less pain and still accomplish all these healthcare goals, that's going to be valuable. And before, just accomplishing the task itself was shooting the moon. That's all they cared about. But as it's advancing, I think that patient satisfaction is going to take innovation to make it happen. So, yeah. And thank you. That was a really nice comment, by the way. I appreciate that.
Spencer, when did you finish nursing school?
I finished nursing school in December of 2013. I had my LPN license when I finished nursing school already. I passed my RN NCLEX boards in February. I got a job in Little Rock in May, and it was actually a godsend that I got the job in Little Rock. I applied for 8 other jobs, and I'm not going to lie, Little Rock was kind of the last one I wanted, and this could not have happened. The ARC Challenge couldn't have happened. Innovate Arkansas couldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been put here. So yeah, that's when it's really happened quick, a quick turnaround. So.
How old are you?
23.
Yeah. We had a question right here.
Eric with WebJive. We've done a lot of medical sites, especially some large ones, one of the world's largest. Question I have for you, when I look back on everything that we've put into those sites as far as content, are you maybe looking at some licensing deals with this? Kind of the same question I had for the last person. And also, would you maybe be looking at other parts of that industry, maybe tackling things like either ports for cancer patients or even catheters and going after BVAD? I mean, there's a lot of room out there still for huge improvement, especially in those areas.
Right. Yeah. To kind of address the first part of the question about partnerships, David is actually currently talking with Medline as well as BVAD because Future Matrix, the manufacturing company, they're kind of a behind-the-scenes manufacturer for BVAD. And one of the things that David's trying to do right now, and we're hoping to have done by demo day, is almost kind of like a promissory agreement for BVAD or one of these companies to say, look, we'll expedite this thing and take it through our FDA process, get it done in half the time that you could, and for that, you're going to give us exclusive acute care facility distribution rights. And that would be the type of licensing agreement we're looking for. Because one thing that we've kind of harped on is the speed to market, and we think that reaching a partnership like that would be huge. Second part of the question, talking about moving forward into other areas of the care. Right now, one of the things about getting it into the market, we wanted it to really softly integrate into the current system, and that's kind of been a theme of the design going through it. But I've got another product that's completely away from catheters that I've kind of been toying around with, once this is kind of in full fruition, I'd love to kind of explore definitely some catheter technology, but just generally some ways that we can make healthcare more efficient, and better for the patient, because the patients are kind of getting the short end of the stick. I feel like just being in a hospital, the insurance companies control half of what goes on. The hospital administration controls the other half, and the patient's kind of just left by the wayside at times. So I'd love to keep thinking of new devices that just make the hospital stay better for patients, because people hate going to the hospital, and I get it because they're sick, but we don't have to make it as laborious and as miserable of a process as it is now.
I've got it, and then I'll give it to you. We're together, in case you're wondering.
I was wondering if y'all just met or
wondering why I'm beating him up here. I'm going to cook with notables. I want to compliment you, and I do hope you continue with this. It takes a lot of guts to go against the stream of things, and that's exactly what you were willing to do here. People get set in a way, and it's just too much to go out there and change. And you had the courage to do that. And I really compliment you for that. And yes, I hope you encourage other young people to do it, and I hope you keep with it. This world needs this, because we're not standing still.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And y'all are being so nice, but as far as like the courage part, I have to put so much credit to initially Jeff Amorine of Innovate Arkansas. Many of you probably know him. And then caveat that with Innovate Arkansas as a whole and the ARC Challenge, because all of this, literally 90% of this I credit to them. I had a good idea, and they really helped me make it, make this dream a reality. So
you went out and searched for it, and you went out and reached for it.
Yeah.
And many will stand back and won't do that because it's easier.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I know. Congratulations. Good to you.
I'm just a layman here, that's all. But would your devices help in the Ebola situation? Do you feel like there's any?
Short answer, no. I don't see it making like a notable impact. But I haven't thought about it. I really haven't thought about that. It could, I guess, but as far as keeping, because with Ebola, the biggest challenge is keeping bodily fluids either in the body or in a waste container, and that's it. So I guess the way it's a closed system, the way it is kind of a clean access to blood, you're not having to re-prick people. Obviously, this is going to decrease the amount of needle stick injuries. There's over 250,000 needle stick injuries to nurses every year. I don't know how many Ebola cases are transmitted through needle stick injuries, but maybe a few. So yes, maybe. I don't know. So
I just sort of thought maybe you could get further away from the patient.
yeah, maybe.
All you're doing is screwing that thing on and pulling the thing.
John Pendergrass, you mentioned the FDA trial. How long a process does that take?
And that's a great question. Sometimes it can take as much as 18 months, even to 2 years with some products, and it really just depends on the product, as well as kind of the organization that you're doing it through. Because this is somewhat of a predicate device, this is not the first catheter to have a dual access port. It's not the first catheter to utilize a dual lumen structure, but it's kind of just a unique mesh of established biomedical principles to accomplish, common healthcare goals. So that's why we think it's going to expedite the process, go through it a lot quicker, because we're not breaking the mold. We're not, it's not a new nanotechnology deal. It's pretty simple, and so we think there's not going to be a lot of flack from the FDA, if you will. So, and I guess fully answer your question. what we're thinking is 6 to 9 months on the FDA approval, which is pretty fast for a device of this nature. So.
Tim Love with Trutzi. When you're talking about hitting the market fast, and we hope it does, are you going to have the manufacturing capability to ramp it up once you do have the FDA approval to get it into every hospital quickly?
Yeah, initially, Future Matrix is going to be doing all of the engineering, manufacturing, all of that. Eventually, we want to, enter a type of distribution or licensing agreement with, say, Medline or BARD or something, and Future Matrix would pretty much, solve all of our manufacturing supply needs to an extent. But I think eventually it would take kind of a manufacturing licensing agreement with one of those much larger companies. But Future Matrix is no small ball. They're pretty. I mean, they have a huge complex in Athens, Texas, that they really do everything. They have sterilization, assembly, packaging, and I don't really see us getting to that point very early. But if we do get to that point, that's a great problem to have. So I that would probably be a year or two after market that we would really have to say, okay, guys, we can't make enough of these things. We got to find somewhere else to make them. So, but yeah, I guess a year or two down the road that could happen.
Any last questions? Awesome. I know this has been reiterated throughout this kind of question process, but Spencer, I want to say this one more time. Hats off to you for going after this, because if you really look at it from a 50,000 foot level, this is a very complex issue to try and actually engineer and build out. And I think through these questions that we've thrown him with, he's done a really good job of answering all of them, and so he's put a lot of thought into this. So hats off to Spencer. Give it up for Spencer.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
So with that,